around the water cooler. So there was a story that you shared from the BBC. Why don't you? I'll read the headline.
Okay.
The trendy secondhand clothing market is huge and still growing, yet still nobody is making a profit.
So the article mainly focused on kind of like larger corporations in the industry.
Yeah, like
ThredUp and
IPOs,
and
like people that have gone public, huge companies.
And basically, there's only one company, I can't even remember the name, that's turned a profit since they've been reselling higher end clothing or vintage. And it's just surprising because it's this immense industry that has quickly grown, I would say, the last decade, and is still quickly growing, but yet no one, at least from this article, seems to be turning a significant amount of profit and building a business that makes money from it. And it was interesting because that's the business we're in.
Right.
I was like, oh, they don't make money. Let's read on.
Let me zoom in on that. Double click.
And there were a couple things that make a lot of sense. The big takeaway I grabbed from it was just scalability. So the supply of clothing in general is massive. Like there's millions of new clothing made every probably month, and the rate at which it's like discarded is much lower than the rate at which they're making clothing.
I would love to know like the amount of, what is it, 8 million people on Earth? 8 billion?
Yeah.
How many shirts? How many shirts per 8 billion? Like, there's 8 billion people. Is there 60? Is it 2 shirts per person? Is it 200 shirts per person on Earth?
I've seen a stat.
Unknowable, but too many.
I've seen a stat on a couple different posts that have made claims that there's enough textile and clothing on Earth currently to service the next 5 generations.
Okay.
So
that's 40 billion?
Yeah, so I don't know what that breakout of item per person is, but it's a lot. It's enough for you and your kids' kids and their kids.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's just a large supply, which if you know anything about economics, is hard to make money when there's a bountiful amount, when it's a commodity.
Right.
When you can go to anywhere and buy it, and it's the same as if you go across the street. So basically, what you're paying for and what you're charging customers is the curation, the and branding of whatever clothing you're purchasing, which is not scalable. You know, if I sell 1 beer or 1,000 beers in a day, the difference is me handing the beer to somebody and purchasing more beer. But if I sell 1 t-shirt or 1,000 t-shirts in a day, then I have to find almost every single one of those t-shirts if I'm curating, you know, high-end vintage or high-end used luxury. And all of those things have variable costs. One day, a t-shirt that you resell for $50, you can find it for $10, but maybe the next day you can't find it for cheaper than $25. So you never know how much your inventory is going to cost, and you never know how much time it's going to take to source it, and you also have no idea what the fuck you're going to find. You know, it's all per chance. So those are huge holes in a business model that is going to be sustainable and grow like over a long period of time.
One thing, so like there was a woman in here yesterday and she thanked us for our prices. And we're insecure now because we just talked about consignment. So like we never used to think we could sell shit for more than 20 or 30 bucks around here. So there was stuff that we knew we could get hundreds of dollars for on the internet that we sold for $25 because we just didn't think we could get more. And a lady came in, and so now we're selling it for a lot more. And so I was kind of pleasantly surprised to hear her, this week thank me for our low prices, because I'm like, shit, I'm worried our prices are high now.
Well, so this is,
you can get t-shirts for $30, $60, $80, $120.
It's all psychological. Like,
right.
This is something I think we should pay attention to. You know, previously, without any consigners, the most expensive thing you'd find in our store would be like tie-dye at $20. And then beyond that, like maybe a handful of jackets for $20, but everything was like $15 and under.
Yeah.
And so if you were to find a $30 piece when 99% of the products in that store are $20 and under, that piece is overpriced.
Right.
But if you are... You know, if you have a $30 piece in a store where the average price is $40, then all of a sudden that's value.
Right.
It's the same piece. It's just what it's surrounded by.
Sure. But the point I was driving at was that she was thanking us for our prices. And one of the things that she said was like, I can't believe what people are charging for some of these things, because they went to some other stores. I can only imagine. I won't say names, but like, some high-end stores. Mm-hmm. And I can't believe people are like, this is secondhand stuff. They got it used. Why are they charging so much? So anyways, this article has a couple of things that I'm going to read a couple quotes from it. We treat waste as if it is a free resource. Sure, you might might give it away for free, but it takes a tremendous amount of effort and labor and skill to try to recommodify that thing that you gave away. Reuse is based on the quality and the condition of the individual item, which means that it requires a human touch and a human eye to assess that. Then there was another one here. You're effectively reverse single SKU fulfillment, which is incredibly difficult, incredibly expensive, and incredibly inefficient. So that just kind of like crystallized and articulated what I've been fucking thinking. You know what I mean?
And interesting enough, a lot of the companies they discussed in this article weren't necessarily resellers, but they were more fulfillment and facilitators. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like these large, like, you don't see any large corporation reselling. Like, there is no national brand of vintage resale stores. At least I don't think. There might be.
It can't exist.
Like,
I mean, Buffalo Exchange just tried. You know, the owner of our building is a contractor, and he got a huge job building on the Buffalo Exchange in Westport. Are they even still there?
I have no idea. Maybe, probably.
I mean, they're the only one I could think of.
And the only national chains that you see would be thrift stores, but that's a whole different business model. And all they're doing is facilitating people. So they're not even making money from the actual finding and reselling of products. They're making money from connecting buyers and sellers and fulfilling those purchases. Mm-hmm. So like they even recognize this isn't scalable. Like to sell 100 t-shirts in a day is way different than to sell 10,000. Like to sell 10,000 t-shirts might be a year's worth of labor. Mm-hmm. Whereas like that's not the case if you're just fulfilling 10,000 orders. So anyway, it was interesting.
I thought it was wildly interesting. There's things that obviously we resonated with, and like we're going to consignment largely because we can make the same amount of money with way less time and labor into it. Mm-hmm. And there's different kinds of labor. There's different kinds of things. I'll just be honest. Yesterday, I lost half my one of our partners came in, he took an hour in the beginning, an hour at the end. And a consignor came in, he took 2 hours. Another consignor came in and made that 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So, there is a cost without question. And then while I was outside taking a break, other consignors came in while you were inside. So there is a cost to consigning that we weren't paying somewhere else. So it's not like just a complete trade-off.
But I think a lot of these will be first-time costs. Like a lot of the extra time set up and getting to know these people all will decrease as time goes on.
Sure. And we're doing it because what we're trying to do is make it more scalable. And let's talk about some of the other people in the game. Reset, Wyco Vintage. They're two of the biggest ones that I know of in Kansas City, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's also Arizona Trading Company, which has a store in Lawrence. There's DVA Percent.
Warehouse Thrift.
Warehouse Thrift is newer.
Yeah.
These are places, but like the ones that have been in the scene, they were there when we arrived, and we have from day one kind of looked up to them. Like I remember when we were first starting, I would go sell clothes to Reset just to understand the market. Like, what would they pay me for this? Yeah. And then look on the internet and see what they resell it for. And so these are just from they were role models from a very, not that we were jerking off to their Instagrams, but in the sense that we were literally just trying to understand how the business that already exists kind of works. Yeah. How does the model work? Reset has pivoted significantly. When you first went in, it was basically 90% vintage and one rack of streetwear like Bape, Supreme, those types of things. Mm-hmm. It is reverse that now. When you walk in at face value, and they were large sneakers, very large wall of sneakers, and that was always a big part of their business. That still is a big part of their business is the sneakers, but the streetwear vintage has, I would say, flipped almost as an inverse of what it used to be. Meaning, just like what we're doing, okay? We want to sell beer because we can order it and sell it and scale it without having to scale our time or find more talented people willing to sell their time for less than it's worth.
Yeah.
So it seems like Reset pivoted. Wyco, I've never really shopped there, but from what I understand, you can't even really get vintage on their main floor. It's tucked upstairs, and they have a bunch of it, but they have pivoted away from retail vintage. Their retail store is now just streetwear.
Yeah.
So that says to me, the more successful you get in our game, the more that people realize some of the shit that's in this article and pivot away from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the cap on reselling vintage is low. Unless you are in the online game and have been in it for a few years. I think
or as an individual. I think as an
Yes.
individual, you can do incredibly well. And there
And
are
without-
people that are making a fuck ton of profit
without the overhead of a store, selling online and curating an online brand. I think there's a lot of money to be made there. There's different, chores you have to do, posting and curating and fulfilling. But
I don't know what Keith makes at Super Thrifty, bro. I don't know what some of the people that make around the city are, but the people that are probably making the most money are online constantly, right? That is their retail store. So,
Yeah.
Monday to Thursday, that's their retail. That's how they make their income. They're also like, I don't know if other people are as active the way Jackson is on Snapchat, on group texts, on Facebook groups. If they're also selling in those places, but my hunch is that they are.
yes,
And they're also popping up.
physically moving.
They're physically popping up
Driving
all the
up
time
to
as well.
go buy something, driving to go sell something, driving to go pop up.
And I
You
could
are-
see people, I would not shock me at all if there are dozens of people in Kansas City making a six-figure income that's relatively untaxed.
Yeah.
Or at least the equivalent of a six-figure income when you figure in the fact that it's untaxed. On just this, and they're their own fucking boss and they design their own time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that wasn't accounted for in the article.
Yes.
But that's hard to scale.
But see, yeah, you're really starting to narrow down the selection of people who can be successful in the business. Like
Yeah.
if only 1 out of 100 people can claim success and pay for their food and bills in in an industry, the industry is probably really hard to do business in.
Yeah.
It's something that you can make $0 and then the next day make 500, but then never make more than 500, like an event or a pop-up the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's real easy to go from like 0 to 500 in a day. You're like, holy shit, this is super profitable. And I did this all in one day and I met a bunch of people and I got all these followers. But then you realize even if you do that 100 times, that cap will only incrementally rise. So I think that's why it's attractive for so many people, but then it's why so few are successful.
It's easy. The concept is easy, right? Like it's a simple model, right? It's not overly complicated, and there's a significant amount of freedom that goes to it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to scale it and really make money, then your freedom really shrinks because there's so much time.
There's a huge amount of front end work that needs to be given in.
Anyways, but the upside really to take from this is that the market is still growing, right? The market is vintage has never been bigger than it is right now. So the bubble, we talk about it as a bubble because it seems like it will burst, it will recede, it will go smaller. But it has never been bigger than it is now, and it still seems to be growing. And I'm not saying that was all a Taylor Swift effect, but here locally in Kansas City, it's hard to not think about Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Because she literally changed the market on Chiefs gear. She drove that up. She might have doubled it just this season.
Yeah, which is crazy because it was already
wild, but in a quick time, the cost and the demand went up real fast.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we'll post that article. It's an interesting article.
it is an interesting article. We should, but the upside is I don't know that there's still money to be made in the industry. It's just how you do it.
Yes.
And we mentioned Rex Catalog. They were one of the victims of theft recently. They're changing their model from what we understand. And it's blowing our minds and we're just getting drips and drabs at a third hand,
Yeah.
It's gossip. We're just gossiping. But it's just so interesting how fluid everything is. And we've been fluid. We are changing our model. You know what I mean? But there's money to be made. It's just figuring out how to do it. Right? Scott Galloway is fond of saying the money is in picks and shovels often and not in the actual gold itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe that's kind of what we're building here. If we can become the infrastructure for the fishermen and the market for the fishermen, can we become Pike's Market for vintage in Kansas City instead of the best fishermen and fish salesmen?
Yeah. No, I got you. I like that way more.
Yeah.